typical to find people complaining about the movement to label genetically modified foods from farm communities. The Great Plains of America, anywhere where food is grown, you hear people talking about that. But today, I got an email from Washington, D.C., actually, that is talking about what would happen if the liberal groups, Democratic members of Congress, and the White House themselves continue to demand new food industry labeling regulations. Well, it would raise the price of food. That came from somebody outside of the farming community. In fact, joining us now on the line, Jeff Stier, representing the National Center for Public Policy. It heads up the Risk Analysis Division and coming to us from New York City. Welcome, Jeff. How are you today?
I'm doing great. Thanks. Good to be with you.
You actually believe that increasing labeling laws identifying foods that contain genetically modified organisms will increase the food cost? How can you believe that?
Well, I think it'll do it dramatically. I think it will be a huge headache for everybody in agriculture, for everybody in food. And those of us that may not work in agriculture, but those who enjoy the fruits of your labor. Look, if genetically modified foods were dangerous, I wouldn't be for labeling either. I'd be for banning them.
Mm-hmm.
Right? These foods are not dangerous. They're in the food supply. They have been for a number of years, and nobody's gotten sick from them. So to suggest that we need to label them for some health reason is absolutely untrue. And if you're going to have to go and find every product in a recipe and identify the ingredients, where they're from, how they were grown, yes, that will increase food. I mean, you probably have to label everything. I mean, that's the bottom line, because unless you spend a lot of money tracking and tracing every single ingredient in a recipe, you can't claim to be GMO free. Now, look, in a free society, every company is free to label their food as GMO-free. As you know, lots of companies are doing that now. But for members of Congress and activist groups, many of whom do not work in the agricultural industry, the only ones that do are pushing organic products. For everybody else, these are products that you can choose to buy. But to require mandatory labeling on food doesn't do any good, and it will increase cost.
But the naysayers say, Jeff, I as a consumer have a right to know. Why shouldn't I know that food contains genetically modified foods?
Well, that's right. And if it's important to you to buy food that is GMO-free, we can have a discussion as to why it shouldn't be important to you. But if it is important to you, and you have a right to have that approach, you can buy those foods. Look, let's say I don't want to buy just to be perhaps equally absurd,
mm-hmm.
Let's say I don't want to buy tomatoes that were harvested on Tuesdays.
Right.
I think that's my prerogative. But do I have a right to know whether tomatoes were picked on Tuesdays? Should we have labeling requirements on tomatoes? These tomatoes were not picked on Tuesdays? No, the way we do it is if I have some desire to eat tomatoes that weren't picked on Tuesdays, I and other consumers like me can demand it. And we can buy products that claim not to have been picked on Tuesdays. And that's up to us. But to impose the cost on deciding when tomatoes are picked, or GM foods, on everybody, when there's no health risk associated with it, is a cost that, I don't like using fancy economic terms, but there's a term for this. It's called rent seeking. Now, that's not like rent like you pay for a house. It's rent seeking is a way of using your political influence to, at the expense of others, to benefit yourself. And that's what's happening here, because the people pushing this are organic farmers. These are people who will stand to make more money as a result of these mandatory requirements. These organic. I have no problem with organic farmers. They're free to market their food as GMO-free. But to impose costs on industry that doesn't choose to be GMO-free and consumers who haven't made that decision, I think for the benefit only of companies like Stonyfield Farms, is a classic example of rent-seeking, of imposing costs on others to benefit yourself.
I think that thinking's even flawed, Jeff, because if there's a law that says you have to label foods GMO-free, or vice versa, containing GMO products,
yep,
it eliminates your opportunity to carve out your own personal little niche by saying, hey, And our foods contain no GMO ingredients. That allows you to charge more for your food. By mandating that, you actually just standardize the entire food system, and it's tougher for you to carve out a niche. It's exact
Well, that's
opposite.
an excellent point, and that's a fantastic point. And those who are trying to make a buck off of organic foods should hear you loud and clear, but they don't. It's, when you don't have confidence in your own business model, you seek handouts, you seek help, and you do it with political power to get help from Washington. And you're right, it may in the long term harm them. Some people say GMO foods are a threat to the environment. But I know a lot of people who are environmentalists who care about the environment who make the decision to buy GMO foods. My mentor was a gentleman you've probably heard of, although too many people not in the agricultural world have not heard of him. And it was Dr. Norman Borlaug. Dr. Norman Borlaug founded the Green Revolution. He was able to help farmers in developing countries grow more food on less land. And before he passed away a number of years ago, he was working on advancing GMO foods. And people who feed the world, people who understand the importance of providing more food, healthy foods to more people at lower costs, these are the people who are advancing GMO foods. The people who are advancing organic, who are trying to increase the cost on organic by requiring mandatory essential warning labels, are the ones who, perhaps they shop in fancy supermarkets, but are they true environmentalists? And that's the question I have. Or are they just trying to advance, as I think you pointed out properly, just trying to advance a political ideology?
The only true environmentalists are those that take care of the land and the livestock. The others are pseudo-environmentalists. And I'm somewhat in shock, Jeff. I did not expect you to bring up the name of the individual that contributed to improving more human lives that ever walked the planet, other than maybe Jesus. Norman Borlaug, by the way, born March 25th, 1914. I didn't need to Google that. I know it because this year and the 100th year of his life, if he died in 2008, by the way, the state of Iowa is going to unveil a bust of a complete life-size statue, I should say, of Norman Borlaug in the U.S. Capitol. How did he become your mentor? It seems like a fish out of water for me.
Well, I study agricultural issues, and you talk about a life-size bust of Dr. Borlaug. He was, and I knew him personally, he was larger than life. He was a very modest man, but the good that he did for society, and while he passed away, his lessons are still with us, and I seek to advance them. He was a scientific advisor, a board member of mine, and he always taught me that you can't have a free society, you can't have a peaceful society on empty stomachs. And we are a growing world. There are more and more people today. There will be more and more people in the future. But the earth isn't getting any bigger. And he implored me to help advance his message, which was to defend and advance the safe and effective use of technology to feed more human people, to defend that technology. And what we saw today with these activist groups advancing a bill to require mandatory labeling on GMO foods is an attack on the use of safe technology. It is an attack on what Dr. Norman Borlaug was advancing. And what I still believe is that we need to take better care of the earth by using better technology to get more food out of less land.
Not that I do anything in the proper order, Jeff Stier, but let's, in the last 2 minutes, make sure people know who we're talking about here today, the National Center for Public Policy Research. It would have been nice to start there, but I got all excited because we need to get into the program. Who is that organization?
Well, we're a think tank based in Washington, D.C. I live in New York City. And we try to make sure that good science, good policy, plays some sort of role in decision-making. All too often it's ideology, it's activism that tries to influence these decisions. And, our view is that we need better science. We need more of the likes of Dr. Norman Borlaug to advance these technologies, to defend good scientific policymaking, because I understand why you were surprised that I knew Dr. Borlaug. But too few people in Washington, too few people making public policy knew who Dr. Borlaug was, and that's a shame. And we need to do more to make sure people knew who he was, what he stood for, and to advance those policies going forward.
Any place where we can get more information, Jeff Stier?
Nationalcenter.org is my organization's website, and you can follow me on Twitter at Jeff, my middle initial A, and my last name, Stier, S as in Sam, Tier.
I'm quite confident that nobody listening, including the host of this program, thought that we would hear the most profound statement as it involves genetically modified crops coming from an attorney living in New York City. But we just had it happen. Jeff Stier said today, in case you missed it, if in fact genetically modified foods were dangerous, I would propose a ban, not labeling them. What else does the world consumer need to know? Thank you, Jeff Stier. I look forward to talking to you again soon.
Likewise, Trent.
I'm Trent Loos. Loose Trails and Tales, the program. Always remember, be gentle, stay firm.